I used to think betrayal came with something you could hold in your hand. A lipstick smear on a collar, a late-night text, a hotel receipt folded like a confession. But the thing that cracked my marriage open didn't start with evidence. It started with my husband sitting across from me at our kitchen table, hands clasped so tight, his knuckles turned white, asking me for an open marriage because he couldn't stop thinking about the woman who delivered packages to his office. I still remember the sound of the refrigerator humming behind him, the way the overhead light made his eyes look too bright, like he'd already rehearsed this conversation 100 times in his head. "Just hear me out," he said, voice shaking. "I love you. I don't want a divorce, but I need to know what this means. I need to explore it." Explore it, as if our vows were a hallway he could walk down, open a door, and come back with his shoes wiped clean. My name is Alex. Alexandra, technically, but everyone calls me Alex. I'm 29. I'm the one who budgets the groceries, remembers birthdays, keeps our whole life running like a spreadsheet because that's what I do for work. I'm an accountant. I believed in numbers because numbers don't lie. People do. He swore it wouldn't be emotional, swore it would be just physical, swore we could set rules that would protect us. And here's the part I still hate admitting out loud. I said yes, not because I wanted it, because I watched my husband unravel in front of me and thought, maybe if I let him get it out of his system, he'd come back to me. Maybe I could save what we'd built. So I let him go on his first date. I let him come home and walk past me like I was furniture, straight to the shower, like he needed to rinse off the guilt before he could look me in the eye. And when he told me the next morning that it wasn't even that great and he wanted to close the marriage again, something inside me went cold, because suddenly he wanted to shut the door only after he'd already walked through it. And that's when I told him, quietly, with my voice steady, even while my chest felt like it was caving in, "No, now it's my turn." And that's when everything got worse. If you'd met us before everything went wrong, you would have called us safe. That was the word people used when they thought it was a compliment. Safe, stable, solid. The couple who hosted family dinners without drama. The couple whose parents posted anniversary photos like we were proof that love still worked. The couple who bought a small house in the suburbs and paid off 2 cars and talked like it was a promise about trying for a baby next year. We'd been together 6 years, married for 4. And the truth is, we didn't fall in love in some cinematic, lightning strike kind of way. We met at a local community event, one of those weekend things the city organizes where you sign up to help, wear a cheap name tag, and pretend you're not sweating through your shirt, while you carry boxes and smile at strangers. He was charming in a quiet way, not the loud guy trying to be the center of attention, more like the one who noticed when I was struggling with a stack of supplies and stepped in without making it a big deal. "Here," he said, taking half the weight, "you're going to dislocate something." I remember laughing, a little breathless, and thinking, he's considerate, that's rare. We talked while we worked, easy conversation, where we went to school, what we did. He was an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, organized, practical, always thinking 3 steps ahead. I'd started out as an administrative assistant at a medical office and had worked my way into a steady, reliable role. We were both state college people with decent degrees and a shared belief that life wasn't about grand gestures, it was about consistency. Dating him felt like exhaling. He didn't play games. He called when he said he would. He remembered the tiny details I mentioned in passing. When my car battery died in a grocery store parking lot, he showed up with jumper cables like he'd been waiting his whole life for the chance to be useful. When I caught the flu and couldn't even keep water down, he sat on the bathroom floor with me and rubbed my back without looking disgusted. I fell for him slowly, then all at once. And because our relationship didn't burn hot, I believed it wouldn't burn out. We moved in together after 2 years, married after another 2. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was warm. String lights, a crowded dance floor, both our families acting like they'd just merged 2 kingdoms. His parents adored me. His mom would squeeze my hands and say, "I always wanted a daughter." His dad would call me kiddo, like I'd grown up in their house. My parents loved him too. My mom cried during his vows. My dad slapped him on the shoulder afterward and said, "Take care of her," with that quiet seriousness dads get when they mean it. Our families didn't just tolerate our marriage, they celebrated it, and I drank that in. I let it convince me that if everyone approved, we had to be okay. His brother Mark and I got along like real siblings, teasing, casual, comfortable. My sister Jessica, my best friend, my built-in honesty machine, used to call us relationship goals whenever she was annoyed at her own dating life. "You two are disgustingly functional," she'd groan over the phone. "Who even does grocery lists together?" "We do," I'd say, smiling while I checked off items. "Because we're adults." We weren't flashy, but we were a system, a life, a house with paint colors we chose together. 2 paid-off cars parked in the driveway like proof we weren't irresponsible. A future we could point to and name. And for a long time, I thought the biggest threat to our marriage would be something obvious. Money stress, illness, kids, the normal things. Not a woman in a brown uniform carrying packages into his office. The delivery driver, Taylor, had been on his route for years. At first, he was barely a footnote in our lives. My husband would mention him the same way you mention a friendly barista. "Taylor brought in a big shipment today," he'd say sometimes, shrugging. "Nice kid." Or, "He joked that my office should start ordering less paper because he's sick of hauling it." I never thought anything of it. Why would I? The way he talked about Taylor wasn't romantic. It was casual, background noise. Then, about 6 months before my life split into before and after, Taylor stopped being background. My husband started mentioning him more often. Not every day, but enough that I noticed. Little stories. How Taylor asked about his weekend plans, how he complimented his haircut, how they talked for 15 minutes while he waited for someone to sign for a delivery. I remember sitting at our kitchen counter, peeling oranges into neat spirals and saying lightly, "You two are becoming friends, huh?" He laughed, but it sounded tight. "Yeah, I guess. He's just easy to talk to." At first, I felt nothing but mild amusement. My husband wasn't the type to make friends easily. He was friendly, yes, but guarded. Work acquaintances, family, me. That was his circle. So if he'd found someone at work to banter with, I thought it was healthy. I didn't realize I was watching the first domino wobble. The night that should have warned me came in March. He walked in the front door and didn't kiss me hello like he always did. He didn't even take his shoes off right away. He just stood there, staring past me into the living room, like his mind was somewhere else. Then he sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, and stared at the wall. Dinner was on the stove. The smell of garlic and butter filled the house. The normal warmth of our life surrounded him, and he looked like he couldn't breathe in it. "What happened?" I asked, my voice softer than my fear. He swallowed hard. "Taylor asked me something today." I waited, heart thudding. He asked if I was attracted to him. The room went silent in that way that makes your skin buzz. I remember blinking, slowly, like if I blinked enough times, the words would rearrange into something less terrifying. "You told him you're married," I said, not a question, a demand for sanity. "I did," he said quickly. "I told him I couldn't answer that it wasn't appropriate." Relief hit me so fast I almost cried. But then he looked up at me, and the relief died in my throat. "I need to be honest," he said, "because I do find him attractive, and I like talking to him. I haven't done anything. I wouldn't cheat on you. But the attraction is there." He said it like a confession he expected to be punished for. He asked quietly, almost like a child, "Does that make me a terrible husband?" And because I loved him, because I believed in our system, because I was so determined to be the kind of wife who didn't panic over normal human impulses, I did what I thought was mature. I reached for his hand. "No," I said. "Feeling attraction doesn't make you terrible. Acting on it would. But you didn't." He let out a shaky breath like I'd given him permission to stay good. I thought that conversation was a stitch in time. I didn't realize it was the first tear in fabric that would keep ripping no matter how carefully I tried to sew. Because after that, he wasn't the same. He'd stare out the window during dinner like he was waiting for something to arrive. He spent more time on his phone. He went to bed early, claiming exhaustion, but I'd lie awake listening to the silence beside me and feel, without proof, like his mind wasn't in our bedroom anymore. And the more I tried to act normal, the more I felt myself turning into someone I didn't recognize. A wife who smiled too hard. A wife who asked, "How was your day?" and watched his face more than she listened to his answer. A wife who began to wonder if love could be stolen without anyone touching. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning with coffee between us, he finally said the words that changed everything. "What do you think about open marriages?" he asked, eyes fixed on the mug like it held the answer. I laughed, one sharp, disbelieving sound. "I think they're a disaster." He nodded too quickly, like he'd expected that, like he'd rehearsed the next step. And when he brought it up again the following week, more direct, more desperate, when he admitted he thought about Taylor daily and looked forward to deliveries more than anything else in his work week, I realized I wasn't fighting an urge. I was fighting a story he'd already started telling himself. And I didn't know yet that the worst part wasn't Taylor. The worst part was how easily my husband began to look at our marriage like it was negotiable. Looking back now, the most dangerous part wasn't the attraction itself. It was how quietly our life began to shift around it. After that second conversation, the one where he admitted Taylor had become the highlight of his work week, I started noticing the negative space, the pauses, the moments where something should have been said but wasn't, the way he'd answer questions without really meeting my eyes, like eye contact might tether him back to me. Our house didn't change. We still paid bills on time, still took turns cooking, still folded laundry side by side in front of the TV. From the outside, nothing was wrong, but inside everything felt weighted. He stopped telling me little things, not big lies, just omissions. He wouldn't mention when Taylor came by unless I asked, and when I did ask, his answers were careful, trimmed down to the bare minimum. Delivery was quick today. That's it? Yeah, that's it. I hated that I noticed. Hated that my body tensed when he said Taylor's name. Hated that I started cataloging his moods like data points in a spreadsheet. One night, while we were brushing our teeth in silence, I asked, "Are you still talking to him a lot?" He froze for half a second. "Not really," he said. That half second stayed with me all night. His family noticed before I said anything out loud. At a Sunday dinner with his parents, his mother pulled me aside in the kitchen while he helped his dad outside with the grill. "Is everything okay?" she asked, lowering her voice. "He seems distracted lately." I forced a smile. "Work stress." She nodded, unconvinced, and squeezed my arm. "You two always bounce back. You're good for him." That sentence lodged itself in my chest like a responsibility. My sister Jessica, on the other hand, didn't sugarcoat anything. "You're walking on eggshells," she said over the phone one night. "I can hear it in your voice." "I'm just tired," I said. "No," she replied. "You're afraid to rock the boat, and that's not you." I didn't tell her about Taylor. I wasn't ready to give the situation that much air. I kept thinking if I didn't name it, it wouldn't become real. But my husband was naming it constantly, just not out loud. He started bringing up articles he'd read, podcasts he'd listened to, stories about couples who had redefined commitment. They stayed married, he'd say, almost pleading. They were honest. They grew. I'd nod, heart pounding, and say nothing, because every time I opened my mouth, I was terrified the wrong word would push him towards something he already seemed halfway into. The night it finally exploded was a Sunday. Rain against the windows. Takeout containers on the coffee table. The kind of quiet evening that used to feel safe. "I need to know something," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Have you crossed any lines with him?" He looked genuinely offended. "No, never." "No touching?" "No." "No texting?" "No." "No meeting outside work?" "No." Relief washed through me so hard it made me dizzy. But then he exhaled and added, "I did tell him I found him attractive, after he asked me that first time." My chest tightened. "You told me you shut it down." "I did, at first, but later, I didn't want to lie." "That wasn't honesty," I said quietly. "That was emotional cheating." His jaw tightened. "We were just being real with each other." Real at the expense of your marriage. That was the first real fight we'd had in years. Voices raised. Words sharpened. Him insisting he hadn't done anything wrong. Me insisting that intent mattered just as much as action. He slept in the guest room that night. In the morning, he apologized. Soft, contrite. He said he understood now. Said he'd limit their interactions to strictly business. Said our marriage mattered more than curiosity or attraction. And for 3 weeks, he acted like it was true. He stopped mentioning Taylor. He laughed more. He reached for my hand again. We visited my parents, and he was present. Engaged, affectionate, normal. I let myself believe we'd pulled back from the edge. Until one night in May, after we'd been intimate, when he turned to me in bed and said, "I haven't been able to stop thinking about him." I stared at the ceiling while the room seemed to tilt. "I tried," he said. "Limiting contact made it worse. I feel like I'm lying to myself." Then he asked the question again. But this time, he wasn't testing the waters. He was asking for permission. And something in his eyes told me he already knew what answer he wanted. There are moments in life where time doesn't slow down. It fractures. That night, lying beside my husband while the sheets still carried the warmth of what we'd just shared, I felt something inside me split cleanly in two. "I want to explore it," he said, "with him. Not if, not maybe. Want." I turned my head slowly, studying his face like it belonged to a stranger. His expression wasn't reckless or lustful. It was careful, earnest, almost rehearsed. "I love you," he continued quickly, as if love could pad the fall. I don't want to leave you. This wouldn't threaten us. It would just be physical. I swallowed. My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming even though I hadn't made a sound. You're asking for an open marriage, I said. Yes. The word hung between us like smoke. I'm asking for permission, he added, softer now. I don't want to cheat. I want to do this the right way. The right way? I laughed once, short, brittle. You already crossed lines. I know, he said, eyes shining. That's why I'm here. I don't want secrets anymore. I rolled onto my side, away from him, staring at the dark outline of our dresser. This was the same room where we'd talked about baby names, where we'd planned next summer's vacation, where I'd once believed nothing could reach us. What happens to us? I asked. To our marriage? We stay married, he said immediately. We work through everything together. This would actually make us stronger, more honest. I closed my eyes. In my chest, hurt and fear tangled with something I didn't expect. Curiosity. Not about Taylor, about us. Was our marriage strong enough to survive this? Or was it already dying, and I was just being asked to sign the paperwork? For a week, I lived in my head. At work, numbers blurred. At home, I watched him like I was studying a case file. His posture, his tone, the way hope flared in his eyes whenever I didn't immediately shut the conversation down. He gave me space. Too much space. Like he was afraid to pressure me, or afraid I'd say no. Finally, on a Sunday evening, I said, if we even consider this, there have to be rules. His shoulders sagged with relief so visible it made my stomach twist. We sat at the dining table like we were negotiating a business deal instead of dismantling our vows. I laid them out carefully. First, I said, everything is disclosed in advance. When, where, who. He nodded immediately. Second, we talk afterward. No graphic details, but no lying. Agreed. Third, protection. Always. Of course. Fourth, either of us can end this at any time. No arguments. He hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Okay. Then he added his own conditions. I want this to stay private, he said. No family, no friends. I shook my head. I'm not agreeing to secrets if this starts affecting our lives. His jaw tightened. And I want us to promise to stay married, he said, no matter what. I looked at him then, really looked. I can't promise that, I said quietly. I don't know who I'll be after this. He was disappointed, but he agreed. That should have told me everything. A month passed. Nothing happened. No dates, no confessions, no changes, except the tension. It lived in the walls, in the air between us. I started hoping he'd decide not to do it at all. Then one afternoon, he texted me. I'm thinking about inviting her for drinks. Just to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, do what you feel is right. That Thursday, I left for work early. I didn't want to see him get ready. I silenced my phone during meetings, pretending professionalism while my chest buzzed with dread. At 4:30 p.m., his message came through. I love you. I'll be home by 7. 7 o'clock came and went. I wasn't home. I sat in a sports bar with my phone face down, the roar of a basketball game washing over me, pretending I wasn't counting minutes. When I finally came home near midnight, the house was quiet. Candles burned low on the dining table. Dinner sat untouched in the fridge. He was asleep in our bed. The next morning, he told me it wasn't amazing, that it made him appreciate me more, that he wanted to close the marriage. And something inside me hardened, because he got his curiosity answered. And now he wanted me to pretend nothing had changed. I met his eyes and said the words that sealed our fate. No. The word no landed heavier than I expected. He stared at me like he hadn't heard it correctly. No, he repeated. No, I said again, my voice steadier than my hands. I wrapped my fingers around my coffee mug just to give them something to do. You don't get to decide this is over just because you're done. His face fell. Alex, I told you, it wasn't worth it. I realized how good we are together. And I'm supposed to be grateful, I asked quietly, that you came back? He flinched. I'm not trying to hurt you. I know, I said, but you already did. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. So what are you saying? He asked finally. I'm saying, I replied slowly, choosing each word like it could shatter glass, that if we agreed this was mutual, then it actually has to be mutual. His jaw tightened. You want to do this out of revenge? This isn't revenge, I said. This is fairness. You didn't stop when I was uncomfortable. You didn't stop when I asked you to. You stopped when you were satisfied. That was the first time he looked afraid. You're going to see someone else, he said, not a question. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair. Do you already have someone in mind? No, I said truthfully, but I will. Are you doing this to hurt me? He asked. I met his gaze. Does it matter? You told me intention didn't count, only action. That shut him up. That weekend, I downloaded dating apps. I made it clear I was married. I didn't flirt or hide or lie. I did exactly what we'd agreed on. Transparency, rules, boundaries. He watched from the couch as I filled out my profile. I could feel his eyes on me, heavy with something I couldn't name. Regret, jealousy, fear. He didn't stop me. Within days, messages came in. One of them was from a woman named Sarah, 25, a nurse. Straightforward, no games. We met for coffee. It was easy, light, no pressure. I told my husband exactly when and where. When I got home, he asked how it went. Fine, I said. We're meeting again. He nodded, swallowed. Okay. But everything about him changed. He stopped talking when I picked up my phone, went to bed earlier, answered questions with one-word replies. When I laughed at a text, he left the room. The night before my first real date with Sarah, he finally cracked. Can we talk? He asked, voice small. I already told you my plans. I know, he said. I made a mistake. I don't want this anymore. I'll do anything to fix it. I looked at him. This man I loved. This man who had opened a door and then begged me not to walk through it. I'm still going, I said. Something in him went dark. He didn't argue. He withdrew. And that's when I started to realize something terrifying. He could handle betraying me, but he could not handle sharing power. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was slow, quiet, corrosive. After my first few dates, my husband stopped pretending he was okay. At first, it came out as concern. When are you seeing him again? How long will you be out? Are you getting attached? Each question was delivered carefully, like he didn't want to trip one of the rules we'd written together. But I could feel the weight behind them, the need to measure, to monitor, to regain control of something he'd assumed would always tilt in his favor. We agreed on basic information, I reminded him one night, standing at the sink while he hovered behind me. Not play-by-play. I'm just trying to understand what's happening to us, he said. I turned to face him. So was I, remember? That ended the conversation, but not the tension. He started staying late at work, or at least that's what he said. He'd come home distracted, scrolling through his phone with his body angled away from me. When I asked how his day was, he'd give me a summary that felt edited. Meanwhile, I was doing exactly what we'd agreed on. I told him when I was meeting Sarah, the woman I'd been seeing. I told him where. I told him when I'd be home. I didn't lie. And somehow, that made him angrier. The night I came home around 10, he was sitting on the couch in the dark. You're late, he said. I told you dinner ran long. With him. Yes. He nodded slowly like he was filing something away. Did you sleep together? That's not part of the agreement. He exhaled sharply. You didn't answer. I don't owe you details you didn't give me. That's when he stood up, pacing like a caged animal. This isn't what I thought it would feel like. I watched him, heart pounding, not with guilt, but with a growing sense of clarity. This is exactly what it feels like, I said. You just thought you'd be immune. He didn't respond. 2 weeks later, I noticed something else. He was coming home later than usual. Not dramatically late, just late enough to feel off. When I asked, he said he'd been covering for a coworker. When I called his office one afternoon to ask about dinner plans, the receptionist casually mentioned he'd left at his normal time. That night, I confronted him. He broke down. Not gracefully, not with accountability. He collapsed into apologies and excuses and fear. She came back, he admitted. The delivery driver. I didn't want to tell you because you didn't want this anymore. You didn't tell me, I said slowly, because you were breaking the rules. I didn't think they still applied, he said almost defensively. You're seeing someone. And I told you every time. Silence. Then, I was afraid you'd say no. That was the moment something fundamental cracked. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was competition. We started living parallel lives, tracking each other's movements, mentally tallying who was out more, who seemed happier, who was pulling away faster. Dinners were eaten with phones in hand. Weekends were scheduled separately. Our house stopped feeling like a shared space and started feeling like neutral territory. Our families noticed. My husband's brother, Mark, dropped by one Saturday afternoon, unexpected. He took in the guest room bed, made up like it had been slept in. The silence. The distance. You two okay? He asked gently. We're working through some stuff, I said. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on the space between us. You always seemed solid. After he left, I sat alone in the living room and wondered when solid had become something fragile enough to shatter quietly. The final straw came when my husband admitted, casually, like it was an afterthought, that he'd met the delivery woman again without telling me, that she'd misunderstood things, that she thought I was controlling him, that she wasn't letting go. And suddenly, this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about safety, boundaries, consequences. And we were already too deep to turn around. The house had never felt so small. Every sound echoed: footsteps in the hallway, the click of a light switch, the low hum of the dishwasher running too long because neither of us remembered to turn it off. We existed in the same space without really seeing each other, like two ghosts haunting different versions of the same life. The delivery woman, Taylor, was no longer an abstract problem. She was a presence. It started with unease, then discomfort, then fear. At first, it was just messages, missed calls on his phone that he dismissed with a shrug. "She's just confused," he said. She didn't expect things to end. But the tone of his voice didn't match the words. One evening, I came home from work and found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. "She showed up at my office," he said without looking up. My stomach dropped. "What?" "She wasn't scheduled. She just came in, asked to talk." And I told her it was over, that I chose my marriage. The word chose should have comforted me. Instead, it felt hollow, like a decision made too late. "She thinks I'm being controlled," he continued, "that you're forcing me." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Of course she does." That night, I barely slept. The next week, things escalated. She started calling our home phone, leaving long voicemails, some pleading, some angry, all of them obsessed with the idea that I was the obstacle standing between her and some version of happiness she'd invented. "She won't listen to me," my husband said one morning, rubbing his temples. "She keeps saying if she could just talk to you." "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." 2 days later, she showed up at our house. I was the one who answered the door. She stood on the porch like she belonged there, arms crossed, eyes sharp, mouth already set in accusation. "I need to speak with him," she said. "He's not available," I replied, keeping my voice even. She leaned forward. "You can't keep him from me forever." Something inside me went ice cold. "I'm not keeping anyone from you," I said. "This is over. You need to leave." She smiled, and it was wrong, unsettled. "We'll see." That night, I locked the doors twice. After that, she started waiting for him. Outside his office, in parking lots, following him halfway home before peeling off like she was testing boundaries. One evening, I stood at the window and watched her car idling across the street. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the windowsill to stay upright. "This isn't normal," I whispered. My husband sat beside me, pale. "I never thought it would turn into this." That sentence, that helpless disbelief, broke something in me. Because I had thought it would turn into this. Not specifically her, not exactly this scenario, but I had known, deep down, that opening our marriage meant opening our lives to people we couldn't control. And now control was gone. The police came once, then again. They told us to document everything, save messages, write down dates and times. Our marriage became a case file. Stress hollowed us out. We stopped touching, stopped eating together, stopped making plans for the future because the present already felt unmanageable. On New Year's Eve, he stayed home. I went to my sister's. At midnight, surrounded by laughter that felt borrowed, I realized something with devastating clarity. Even if she disappeared tomorrow, even if the fear stopped, I didn't know how to find my way back to him. I drove home in silence, the city exploding with fireworks I couldn't bring myself to watch. That was the lowest point. Not the stalking, not the fear, but the understanding that love alone was no longer enough to save us. The turning point didn't come with a scream. It came with paperwork. A thin manila folder sat between my husband and me on the dining table, its edges already soft from being opened and closed too many times. Inside were printed screenshots, voicemail transcripts, dates, times, our lives reduced to evidence. "This is enough," the lawyer said calmly. "You qualify for a restraining order." I felt something in my chest loosen, not relief, clarity. Because up until that moment, a part of me had still been waiting for my husband to fix this, to say the right thing, to take control, to protect us. But sitting there, listening to a stranger explain our options in a neutral tone, I finally understood the truth. There was no version of this where we went back to who we used to be. The restraining order was filed in November. She was served at her apartment, ordered to stay away from both of us, our home, our workplaces, any form of contact. No calls, no messages, no accidental run-ins. And for the first time in months, the house went quiet. No phone vibrating at odd hours. No car idling outside. no tightening in my chest when headlights slowed near our driveway. But the silence didn't bring us closer. It exposed the distance that had been growing long before the fear set in. We didn't talk about anything except logistics: who would be home late, which bills were due, what paperwork needed signing next. Conversations that used to flow now felt forced, like we were actors reading lines from a script we no longer believed in. One night, while folding laundry in the living room, I asked, "Do you ever think about what we'd be doing right now if none of this had happened?" He didn't look up, all the time. "And?" He hesitated. "I don't know how to get back there." Neither did I. That was the moment I stopped blaming her. Yes, she crossed lines. Yes, she became dangerous. But she hadn't broken our marriage. She'd just walked through the crack that was already there. In December, we started sleeping in separate rooms, not out of anger, but exhaustion. Our schedules were different, our energy was gone. Even sharing a bed felt like pressure neither of us could carry anymore. On New Year's Eve, we made the decision without saying it out loud. He stayed home. I went to my sister's. At midnight, as people hugged and cheered and promised themselves fresh starts, I stared at my phone and realized I didn't want to text him anything. Not "I miss you," not "I love you," not even "Happy New Year." And that's when I knew. In January, we sat across from each other again, this time without a lawyer. "I think we need space," he said quietly. I nodded. "I think we do too." No shouting, no accusations, just two people acknowledging that something precious had been dismantled piece by piece, and neither of us knew how to rebuild it. I moved out first, stayed with my sister while we figured out next steps. We told our families we were taking time apart. But in my heart, the decision had already been made, because I didn't want to survive anymore. I wanted peace. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, quiet, unavoidable, and final. We separated in January. Not dramatically. No suitcases thrown down the stairs. No shouting matches. Just a mutual understanding that the house we'd bought together had become a place neither of us could breathe in anymore. I moved in with my sister temporarily. He stayed in the house. At first, we tried to keep things respectful. Texts about mail, about bills, about whose turn it was to call the realtor. But even those messages began to feel unnecessary. Our families found out slowly. My parents were stunned but supportive. My mom cried on the phone, not because she blamed anyone, but because she kept asking, "I thought you were happy." His parents were quieter, confused. His mother tried to frame it as stress and bad timing. His father asked practical questions about finances, about logistics, like if he could spreadsheet his way through grief. Friends chose sides without meaning to. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations got awkward. People didn't know what to say to the couple who had seemed unbreakable and then wasn't. In March, we filed for divorce. It was straightforward. No kids, no screaming fights over assets. We sold the house and split the proceeds, divided furniture like it was inventory. He kept the couch. I took the dining table, the one we'd sat at when we wrote rules for a marriage that didn't survive them. The divorce was finalized in June. I remember standing in the courthouse hallway afterward, holding a single folder, feeling strangely light, not happy, not relieved. Just done. He moved to a smaller place closer to his office. I found an apartment across town with good light and quiet mornings. We didn't exchange addresses. We didn't stay friends. The restraining order remained in place. As far as I know, she followed it. The chaos stopped. But by then, the damage had already carved its shape into everything. Months later, I realized something unsettling. I didn't miss him. I missed the idea of us, the version of our marriage before it became conditional. I'd learned something expensive and irreversible. Some doors don't just lead to new rooms. They lead out of the house entirely. And once you step through, you don't get to decide who follows, or what gets destroyed on the way out. The quiet came first. Not the empty kind that echoes, but the kind that settles. Soft mornings, clean counters, a life that finally belongs to you again. After the divorce, I had to relearn how to exist without monitoring someone else's emotions. No more reading tone, no more bracing for hard conversations, no more pretending I was okay with things that hollowed me out from the inside. I started small. I rearranged my apartment so nothing reminded me of compromise. I cooked meals I liked without asking anyone's opinion. I went to bed early just because I could. I woke up without the low-grade anxiety that had lived in my chest for nearly a year. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was repetitive. Some nights I cried unexpectedly, over a song, a smell, a memory that belonged to a woman I no longer was. Other nights I felt nothing at all, and slowly that nothing turned into peace. I don't hate him. I don't hate her either. Attraction happens. Curiosity happens. Even mistakes happen. What broke us wasn't desire. It was the belief that we could manage consequences without paying their full price. We thought rules would protect us. We thought honesty would be enough. We thought love could absorb anything. It can't. Love isn't infinite. Trust isn't elastic. And marriage isn't an experiment you can roll back once you don't like the results. I've gone on a few dates since then. Nothing serious, nothing rushed. I'm careful now, not in a fearful way, but in a self-respecting one. Because I learned something I wish I'd known sooner. If someone asks you to compromise your safety, your stability, or your peace just to keep them comfortable, they're already halfway out the door. And if you say yes to something that breaks you, hoping it will save the relationship, you don't save the relationship. You just lose yourself faster. I didn't walk away from my marriage angry. I walked away awake. And that, more than anything, is what finally set me free.